I think the stage is radically set for what I think is going to be a pretty astonishing move. And I think the stakes are really high. This is not just about building your own fortune. Not just about stack as much as you can and get really rich and forget about everything else. This is really important for society. This is an integral part of having a free world that we're fighting for right now.
What up, Vigilantes? I'm here with Mr. Z, and we're going to talk about what went down with Luna. If you guys have not noticed, Mr. Z was the guy to prophesy exactly what went down with Luna from the Crypto Vigilante, and I'm happy to be here with him. How are you doing, Mr. Z?
I'm doing great, Rafael. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. Pleasure to be speaking with you. And well, maybe you can tell people about how it is that you came to realize what eventually happened with Luna.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So I actually hadn't really focused on Luna initially. The exercise was in response to some questions from subscribers. So some of our subscribers were getting involved or looking at a different project called Haven, or XHV is that ticker, which is a whole nother ball of wax. But in the process of looking at Haven, I saw Luna, and I kind of scratched my head at the very beginning. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing, because it was only about a year ago, actually less than a year ago, that the Titan project blew up, which was Mark Cuban's stablecoin project. And I thought that the market had well moved past the notion of these death spiral projects. And I thought, what am I missing here? This seems crazy to me. Luna was trading at only a very small buffer to kind of the levels that would cause it to implode, in my view, the way that Titan did. And I guess the only thing that they really had going was dangling this carrot, that there was some kind of a mechanism where they were going to put Treasury Bitcoin in to defend it. But that frankly didn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. And yeah, and it didn't seem that difficult to see it. The hard part was actually looking at it and going, wow, the market's just really wrong. And, when you see $1 billion market cap, you want to respect it. You want to acknowledge that there's people putting money into it, and a lot of smart people, presumably, doing that. A lot of institutional investors backed it. But when I looked closer and closer, it went, wow, the emperor's got no clothes. And it seems like that's a theme. That's a theme in crypto in a lot of spaces, isn't it? Emperors walking around naked, and a lot of people just going along for the ride.
Right on. So right now you're working on a piece. I mean, you've been warning our subscribers about a lot of things, and obviously we don't want to give away things that are for our subscribers here. But if you really want to know what Mr. Z is talking about and what his predictions are and how he's analyzing the market in the present moment, maybe you should consider becoming part of the Crypto Vigilante. But Mr. Z, you've been working on many different assessments that lead you to logical conclusions similar to that of Luna, have you not?
Yeah, that's right. So look, my view is, first and foremost, our intention is to find opportunities to make money for ourselves, for our investors, for our subscribers. It's finding the ideas and fleshing them out. So on the technical trading side, I'll absolutely defer to Mr. A, Mr. W, Mr. X, yourself, Ed, Jeff. My expertise is on the fundamentals and just understanding actually the plumbing and actually what works. Do projects work or not? So look, obviously the most exciting thing is when we find a project that I get really excited about, that I think actually works and has real promise. The bear market doesn't help, because even terrific smart projects are getting hurt just as a function of the overall technicals in the market. But at the same time, a big part of investing is not just picking winners, but it's avoiding losers, and it's making sure that you avoid things that just don't work fundamentally. And look, you're always free to play. we never tell investors what to do or subscribers what to do. We suggest and say, look, this is what we think. This is why we think what we think. And you're free to make your own assessment. But our job is to inform as much as we can. And I think in terms of projects that have problems and that don't work, yeah, we've had a couple of instances where subscribers have asked and said, hey, we're all looking at this project, or can you take a look at that one? And I think, you've written about it before, Rafael, like in your sort of Viva Positivity, our focus, we want to find good things to rally behind. We don't want to just call things shitcoins and be in the job of chasing bad things and highlighting that, because frankly, that's not a very satisfying job, and it's a never-ending job, and it's not making anybody any money, right? So, right. But at the same time, if people ask us and ask me, and it makes sense, I'm going to dig in. And yeah, there've been I've called a couple of scenarios where I think, frankly, projects just fundamentally either don't work or have real limitations, and I think that's really important. It's really important to understand these limitations, because from a trading perspective, things can pump, right? Things can pump, things can crash in the short term, no doubt. But particularly if you're thinking about getting into a project and your goal is to make, 10 times, 100 times, crazy types of returns that are available in crypto because of where we are in the cycle and in the broad levels of adoption. If you want to make those kinds of returns, ultimately, the mechanics, the fundamentals have to shape up. They have to hold steady, because the only way these projects are going to really take off is if they attract real investment capital, not just speculators, but real, deep-pocketed individuals, potentially institutions, and they're going to do their homework. They're going to do the exact kind of analysis that I provide to subscribers. This is my background as well, dealing with institutional investors. So they're going to do the same analysis, and if they reach the conclusion that a project is flawed, they're not going to waste any time on it, because why would you want to lock up your money in something that's only has value to the extent that there's a greater fool that you could sell it to tomorrow? Those are not the kinds of projects that are going to sustain long rallies, long pumps that are going to make people generate enormous returns. So I think making sure that investors and subscribers have an opportunity to sidestep these things, I think that's just as important as finding the ones that are going to go up, because not losing money should be is sort of the first rule, right? We don't want to lose money, and we want to make money, so they go hand in hand.
Right on. So, your approach to fundamental analysis is very interesting, given your background. For anyone watching right now, what would you say is when you assess a cryptocurrency, what are the red flags that immediately you look for?
Well, red flags. There's a lot of it's you almost have to weed through the constant red flags, which are just sort of people kind of pumping and just getting all excited about it. You have to sort of take emotion out of it, and that's for good and for bad. It's great that people get excited and get emotional about this, but it has to be you got to be really disciplined in how you look at it and question everything. Just question everything. And if it doesn't make sense to you, don't assume that it still makes sense. That's kind of the way I view it. And I may not be right about everything. Certainly, look, I'm a human being like everybody else, and we all make mistakes and we all miss things. But at the same time, I've got pretty good experience, track record, and I've gone through these things quite a few times, where I've got the confidence that if you can't explain it to me, or if I can't understand it in a way that makes sense, that's a problem. If it's it's kind of like there's an old saying when it comes to writing reports, and this is back in a long time ago when I was a publishing research analyst in a very different market environment, not crypto. There was a joke saying, "Hey, sorry, here's the report. Sorry, it's 20 pages. I didn't have time to make it only 5 pages." Right? Because it's easy to just write lots and lots of stuff and throw information out there, but to crystallize things down to first principles and go, all right, here's an easy way to understand it. And to me, that's a sign of really grasping the material that you're working with. If you can take something that seems complicated and break it down and explain it in simple terms to someone who may not have your background and may not know the jargon, to me, that's sort of the merit in being able to go through the analysis. So in terms of how I look at things, first and foremost, I just want to understand it. I want to say, all right, what's going on? Where is the money flowing? Follow the money, right? Because ultimately the question is not about, does this project help the world, right? Which is great. Like that's what we're interested in crypto. We want crypto to rebirth the world in lots of ways. But as an investor, and recognizing that there has to be an economic mechanism to allow these projects to survive, you've got to follow the money. And you've got to ask, all right, when all is said and done, when you follow the money in terms of how the project works, how money comes in, how it goes out, how it's staked or held or whatever, how does that value translate into the token actually being worth something? How does that mean that the project that me as an investor, I'm going to actually benefit from that mechanism? And why do I have to benefit from that mechanism? Because if people are putting money into a project, but it's just going into the pocket of some person or some group that's not associated with the token, then why are you investing in the token? There has to be a clear path. And for me, it just comes down to first principles. It's really understanding and saying, all right, what are we trying to accomplish? And just make it simple. Walk me through it step by step. I'd like to say that that's an easy thing to get the answer for. Unfortunately, it's not easy. And at the same time, that's why I'm here, trying to contribute and make it easier for our subscribers to do. Very frequently, you can read through white papers, you can read through documentation. There's actually another project that I'm taking a look at right now, which will be coming out potentially this month, that I'll be discussing. It's a new one in terms of me talking about it. Jeff had flagged it for review, and I'll tell you, going through the white paper, going through the documentation, it's not clear. It's not straightforward stuff. And whether that's a function of devs and developers just not doing a great job of explaining it, or actually not understanding it themselves, that's a question. And I'm not trying to throw rocks at anybody, but ultimately it's got to make sense. And if you're investing in something in crypto where you don't understand it, you don't understand why it's acting the way it's working, look, we can't understand everything. And certainly when it comes to technicals, I think that there's a big element respecting that is important. But if you just say to yourself, I don't know how this thing works, and I'm trusting that someone else smarter than me or better informed than me is right, that's a risk. And you just got to acknowledge that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong, but you got to be realistic with yourself and understand what your limitations are and know where you're relying on someone else. And if you see some information then that's contrary to what was presented, and that source that you're relying upon doesn't have a good answer for it, well, you've got to take that really seriously. You got to really question whether you should be involved in what it is that you're involved in.
So, given the state of affairs with crypto, I have a very crystal clear understanding of what I would think is best, and that is that we're all racing towards sound money, and that in order to be sound money in this age of modern finance, you need to be able to have one unit of account always be interchangeable for another unit of account within that medium of exchange. So that's a very clear-cut understanding of the importance of privacy at the protocol level. My question to you is, do you foresee a strong investment demand towards privacy coins?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing it already. I think just in 2022, just watching Monero trade and buck a lot of downtrends. I think we're seeing that those fund flows already occur. I mean, as a percentage of Bitcoin's value, it's done actually pretty well. Still a fair ways to go, but I think that all of the fundamentals are there for a greater appreciation for Monero and the broad, not just Monero, it's the broader privacy coin universe that's really so interesting. And I think like in a bear market, Monero is going to be the focus of attention, and that's what we're seeing. It's the leader in the space. It has been for a long time, and I think that when people look for sort of the safer places to play in a bear market, that's what they're going to focus on, and that's what we're seeing. But all the pieces are in place. It comes down to awareness being raised and people kind of getting it that privacy is important, and at the same time, not just the importance of privacy, but frankly, something that we take really for granted, which is that in TCV, we take for granted that we all understand that Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these other projects that have the most publicity, we understand that they're not private at all, that they're surveillance coins. And the process whereby people come around to that, it's been a slow process. People don't necessarily understand that straight away. They see the complexity of it and assume that, wow, I have this wallet address and it seems really complicated and no one could ever guess my wallet address. How could they ever possibly know that it was me? How could I ever possibly get, called out for, monitored transactions that don't make some regulatory authority happy? How could I ever be tracked in that way? And we see it every day. We're aware of it. That takes time for people to actually come around to. And I think that in some ways, the whole COVID scenario, the truckers issues in Canada, when funds were frozen and Bitcoin was frozen, and even with Russia, calls for sort of regulating that and freezing normal citizens' accounts in Bitcoin. I think that's made a lot of people do a double take and go, wait a minute, this was supposed to be freedom money and it's not. So what is it game over, or is there a missing piece to privacy and to liberty associated with crypto that we haven't yet seen? So I think the stage is radically set for what I think is going to be a pretty astonishing move. And I think the stakes are really high. This is not just about making building your own fortune. Not just about just trying to stack as much as you can and get really rich and forget about everything else. This is really important for society. This is an integral part of having a free world that we're fighting for right now in lots of different ways. So I think that more and more people are waking up every day, and we see it. We see it in the movements. I think technically, we're in a bear market, certainly well off the highs for Bitcoin and everything else. But I'm still really constructive. It's not been a traditional move in lots of ways, even according to our technical analysis experts. And with Bitcoin hovering here around 30K, that actually still means a lot of money's flowing into Bitcoin. People forget that. People think that Bitcoin staying flat means nothing is happening. That's not true. Because Bitcoin is generated every 10 minutes, because right now, 6.25 Bitcoin come to market every 10 minutes. That means that for the price to stay the same, new money has to keep coming in. So there's always new money flowing. It's just a question of how quickly that money flows. And so in my mind, the fact that it's stabilized here for as long as it has, with all the bad news, there's so much bad news, so many technical things, Luna and otherwise, that have whacked it. I don't think fundamentally destructive on a long-term basis, but certainly enough to take the wind out of the sails of speculators and momentum people. I think that's actually really constructive. So I think the broad market is getting itself poised really well for a good move, and I think privacy coins are going to be a big part of that. It wasn't that long ago. Years, but not many years ago, where Monero was in the top listing of coins, right? And it went from down to, I think it was as low as sort of number 40 or 50 to now I think it's in the top 20 or close to it. And it's one of these things where the more attention it gets, the more attention it gets, right? As Monero moves up into the top 10, people look at it and go, oh, what's this? What is this coin? Wasn't this just a shit coin from a few years ago that came and went? And then they realized, no, this is actually something this is the baby that was thrown out with the bathwater when the market crashed in 2017. And if anything now, it's more valuable. Privacy is even more valuable. Privacy today is more powerful and valuable than it was 4 years ago. This was, or 5 years ago. This is the age of COVID and government surveillance and all the stuff that we know about, that we know that's happening. So the value to this private crypto, I think it's just, we're in the really early innings of this. The estimates that we've got, and then I've published before in previous articles from a fundamental basis of valuing Monero, valuing pirate chain, Monero, Dero. Look, the market's down. Those are arguably bull market value. Well, those are bull market valuations, I'll say. But the reality is they're not that bull market valuations. Like, the real bull market valuations are a lot higher than that. There's a real prospect that Monero and privacy coins could explode in ways and challenge Bitcoin for dominance in ways that we're not even really considering, because it's not on the immediate horizon. But I think that's a real prospect. So I think that's just important to keep in mind longer term. We're not in this for a 3 month, 6 month gain. We're talking about massive types of returns and massive shifts in public consciousness as to what the importance of privacy is. And it's amazing to me in my everyday life how people that I meet day to day who don't know anything about crypto or know very little about crypto, and maybe have bought some Bitcoin, and I'll sort of casually ask them questions, and they know that I'm a little bit informed, let's say, and they'll ask me questions, and they'll say, "Oh, well, what do you like?" And I'll tell them, I like the privacy coins because Bitcoin's not private, and their eyes kind of go wide. They still don't even get that. And it's amazing to me how few people still understand that. And that to me is an enormous opportunity. It's like we haven't even tapped into that yet. So I think that the wind is in our sails now. It's happening. And once you see that, once you get that, you can't go back. You don't move in the other direction. It's done. You've seen the truth. You've seen how this stuff works. So, I think it's early innings still, and I'm still, massively bullish on the space. I think, Mr. X has stated, I don't even think he owns any Bitcoin. I think he said he's predominantly focused on two of the privacy coins that we discussed. And I think that's a very reasonable place to be.
Yeah, right on. 100%. So, Mr. Z, like, you mentioned something really important. You said that, I don't know if you meant to say this, but that during the bear market, we're seeing Monero leading the space. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that even though everything's going down, Monero is actually holding its ground better than most. And I think significantly so in some ways. And you can see that, if you just look at Monero in dollar terms, it's a little bit hard to see, because you can say, it's still under $200 per token, and it's still down a lot from the highs, et cetera. But if you look at it as a percentage of Bitcoin, which is the way that it often trades, whether depending on the site that you use, it's actually outperformed. If you had put on a Monero trade, call it 3 months ago, if you had bought Monero and shorted Bitcoin as a hedge, you would be massively up. You'd have almost doubled your money. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. You can take a look at it, but I think it's almost a double. I remember it being about, I think it was at around 0.3% of Bitcoin, and now it's 0.665. That's more than double by my math. So it's pretty incredible that even with the whole market going down, it's just creeping up. And you can see this also if you look at CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko. Just look at its ranking as to where it was 3 or 6 months ago versus where it is today. It keeps creeping up, which means money keeps flowing in. There was an interesting article last year about a private bank, a private European bank that had bought, I think it was 150 million euros worth of Monero. And that was sort of the first institutional money, if you will. And you can argue, you can debate what institutional money means and how this particular bank, I think it was Goldman Lampy, how it falls into the category. But still, it's institutional in as much as This is about serious asset management and serious investment management, trying to enter the market and seeing the value in Monero. And I think that that's actually happening in quite a number of spaces. I think that institutions really are beginning to look at it and to seriously consider it for an investment allocation. And this is actually something that I wrote about. I think it might have even been my first article when I joined TCV. I guess it was about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, talking about the institutional investability of Monero. And one of the hurdles that Monero has, at least has had historically, is this taint, right? This taint that, oh, it's for criminals and, it's used on the dark web, which is, of course, exactly what people said about Bitcoin, right? When Bitcoin
Right.
was starting for the year, right? Years ago in the beginning. And I think as an institutional investor, if you're managing money for wealthy families or for pension funds or whatever, ultimately you're beholden to your investors. And if you make money, everyone's happy. But if you lose money, then you better have a good explanation as to why you lost money, right? And so, all right, everyone can understand that you might have made a mistake or the market could have turned against you, but you have to have a good ability to explain, look, this position went against us, but here's why I bought it. And here's why it was a good idea at the time, because good ideas don't always pan out, certainly not on the time frame that we want them to. So from an institutional perspective, I think what's really changing is that there's a greater recognition that Monero is not about illegality. It's not about committing crimes or evading taxes or buying drugs. Monero is about something much more fundamental that I think everyone can appreciate, which is privacy. And it's that you don't want to broadcast to the world everything that you say and do from a financial perspective. And unfortunately, that's what Bitcoin does. And so I think that even in this bear market, it's pretty incredible to see that it's holding its ground as well as it has. I used to work at a hedge fund, and the head portfolio manager, when the market would crash or just be a bear market, he looked around there because he was predominantly a long only fund. We would short some stuff, but it was predominantly long only. And he would say, something goes up in every market, right? We got to find what that is. Every market, I don't care how bearish it is, something's going to go up, right? What is that? And often the things that we would look at and that he would call to our attention were things that weren't going down as much as other stuff, right? Things that were maybe staying the same. Because it takes a lot of conviction, it takes a lot of balls and capital to be putting money into something when the whole market's weak, right? So if you're doing that, if the market's doing that and saying, hey, we're putting money into Monero, everything's down, but Monero is unchanged. That's the equivalent in a bull market of Monero is mooning, right? Like when you have that level of conviction, that takes a lot of conviction to be able to defend a position like that when it feels like everything else is going down. So to me, there's actually arguably more positive signal when I see something hold its ground in a bear market than when I see something just, pump in a bull market. So I think that's a really important consideration to take into account, and it's one of the reasons why I continue to remain so bullish on the space. Is that if we can just kind of holding ground, and it's the same thing for Monero as it is for Bitcoin. Any crypto that mines new coins means that to hold its ground, new money has to come in because there's always new supply coming. So holding your ground in this space or improving your ground relative to Bitcoin or everything else, that means that there are an increasing number of investors with conviction that are going, you know what, this thing is working and this thing is going to work and I'm stacking. This is a time to be stacking. That's when things don't crash with everything else. When the market crashes and Monero is flat, that means people are stacking. And that's a smart thing to do in my mind.
Right on. No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I thank you so much for saying that. I know everyone listening to this is appreciating what you just said, because it is very true. The level of conviction that you find around Monero is as strong, and I would even say probably stronger than Bitcoin in the early days, because in the early days of Bitcoin, there was always that question whether whether the protocol was going to hold its monetary qualities over time. And, a lot of people thought that if you're, that coin joins, that mixers were going to provide Bitcoin with fungibility, but we quickly realized that that was not the case. So now that we learned from that mistake with Bitcoin, the level of conviction in Monero is unlike anything else. So thank you for pointing that out. I really appreciate that. So
yeah, and Rafael, you just gave me actually one more. You reminded me of one more thing I'd just like to add is that, I think that in this downturn, one thing that I've noticed, and I've we as part of the team, we're talking all the time with you, Mr. X, Jeff, and the other misters. I think we were talking about the sort of the feeling in the market for this latest downturn, right, in terms of Bitcoin going down, and I threw out there that to me, what's different in this market correction versus say last year's when we went down to 30K or 28K in Bitcoin, is it feels like the number of people that are existentially saying, this isn't working, is a lot smaller. In other words, people aren't looking at it now going, Bitcoin's failed, like crypto's failed, it's going to zero. People are looking at it more now and going, we're in a bear market, but it will turn. It's not something that's going away. There's a growing understanding that this is something that is not going anywhere. So to me, that gives a lot of encouragement. And to one other thing, it's something that I was meaning to comment on at some point. Maybe I'll even write something about it. But thinking about your discussion, your debate with Tone Vase, was it a month or 2 months ago when you were talking about store of value? There's a lot of questions saying, is this a store of value? It's gone down in price, Bitcoin, Monero, etc. I think it's really important to recognize that store of value, it really depends on your time horizon, right? And what we're talking about is a massive debasement of global currencies. It's happening right now with inflation and all sorts of other shenanigans. And in my mind, to test Monero or even Bitcoin for that matter as a store of value now and say, its price has gone down, it's not a store of value. I don't buy that at all. The store of value argument is in our crystal ball that we think we're holding, we see a world where all money is digital, right? And cash, anonymous, private digital cash is a hugely demanded product, right? In that world, the store of value argument is gonna hold like nobody's business. So I think that people are confusing often store of value from, can I make money on this in 3 months or 6 months? Is it going to go up or down in 3 or 6 months? And it may or may not. But I can tell you that I believe that whether it's 3 months or 6 months from now, or maybe it's 3 years from now, we're going to be at levels that are going to be a lot higher than where we are now. So I think anyone who kind of throws out, store of value, it hasn't performed since this date or that date. No. We're not talking about these horizons. We're talking about the future. We're talking about massive shifts in the world and how the world interacts with each other, and what will hold value in that world that is impending. It's coming. We all know it's coming. Like you have to have your head screwed off the wrong way to think that digital money is not going to be the way of the future. And in that scenario, all right, well, how do you preserve value in digital money? It has to be something that's finite. It has to be something that's fungible. You tick those boxes and you've got store of value. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there as well, because it was itching me for a while.
Right on. So I want to ask you 2 more questions. Do you have time?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the first question regards Pirate Chain. Pirate Chain, where do you see Pirate Chain in its positioning? And after everything you explained regarding Monero, what role do you see Pirate Chain playing?
Yeah, I am extremely bullish on Pirate Chain, and the reason for that is I think the fact that Pirate Chain uses fundamentally different privacy technology, that it uses ZK snarks, is enormous, right? So Monero, its technology is amazing. But the privacy community, by its very nature, needs diversity. It need, and I know there's a lot of calls for diversity. I'm not calling for that kind of diversity, but I'm calling for diversity in technology and diversity in protocol. As far as we can tell, there's really only two options out there, right? There's Monero's privacy technology, which uses ring CT, and other elements as well. And then there's Pirate Chain, which is ZK Snarks, where it's mandatorily private as opposed to, say, in Zcash, which doesn't really work, as we know. And I think that there's a massive place for having an alternative technology, because we know that privacy is always going to be evolving and come under attack. And you need that. I think I call it redundancy in the system. When you're building any kind of a technical system, you always want to have redundancy, a backup plan, that if the power goes out, you've got a generator that keeps you going, right? Same thing applies to the privacy coin community. And I think that having a viable backup, if you will, is enormously valuable. Now, that's sort of underselling it, I think, because honestly, I think Pirate has the ability not just to be a backup, but to be the lead. It's from a privacy perspective itself, you can argue that it's actually superior to Monero. I know that's a bit controversial for some people, some Monero maximalists, I get that, but there's a really strong argument to be made in that regard. So I think
and you were Monero maximalist, right? For a long time, were you not?
I absolutely was. And I thought there was only room for one, but it was realizing just how important redundancy is in this system, especially realizing how it's going to always be under attack, right? Whether it's a function of just hackers trying to figure out new ways around it, to break the code, which we don't think is possible, but you never know. There's always exploits that are possible, or it could be a different kind of attack. It could be a human behavioral attack, or affecting the network, or reducing confidence in the network. We all see the trials and travails of Fluffy Pony right now being presumably targeted, for very questionable allegations. Let's say that we all suspect is really driven by an attack on Monero, right? And his association with Monero is kind of what we think is the most likely scenario. There's all sorts of ways that projects could be compromised, and I think the value of having a really powerful alternative, I think, is enormous. So the fact that Pirate Chain is trading at such a small fraction of Monero's market cap, to me, that's just wrong. And I have been adding myself. I've been adding to my own bags. I think bear markets are where you want to do that. In a bull market is where I would see Pirate Chain really showing itself and actually stepping back up to kind of the levels that it had been at the previous highs. And forget nominal dollar prices. Just think in terms of relative to Monero. It traded as high as about sort of 15 to 20% of Monero's market cap. And I don't have it in front of me, but I think we're at like less than 5% now, which is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. So to me, Pirate Chain is not going anywhere. And as Monero grows, as the awareness of privacy coins grows, I think that we are going to enter a new bull market. It's not a question of if, but when. And when that happens, I think we're going to see massive outperformance in Pirate Chain. And I'll just add, there's actually one other coin. It's super small market cap right now. It's well narrow. I've written about it. I think having a third is powerful, and I've written about why a meme coin is actually even considered having fundamental value. I think that's a huge part of it as well. So I remain constructive. But look, these are bull market trends. Until the market gets big enough that it can stand on its own legs, it's going to be subject to the vagaries of the overall market moves. So I think Pirate Chain and Monero and a few others, they're going to probably lag Monero, because Monero is sort of the safe haven, if you will. And it's also, by virtue of its larger market cap, it's also where institutional money can start to play and not drive the price up too crazily, right? So they can actually accumulate a stake without pushing it up too much, which is what they want. You don't want to push the price up. Individual investors, we all think the same way, right? We want to buy, we want to put, I don't know, let's just say $5,000 into a coin, and then we want to see it go, 10 times the next day. Institutional investors want to put a lot more money in, and they don't want it to go up until they're done. And when a market cap is really small, it's hard to do that. So Monero right now has the ability to absorb more of that money without pushing it up too much, until all of a sudden everyone realizes that all the excess supply has been taken away, and then it does pump. So look, I think that Pirate, I think WoW, I think other names that we've got that we've spoken about before. I think that they're just a huge opportunity right now is to be stacking. This is how you generate the big returns, right? And I think Jeff's trade in Luna is an incredible example, right? You've got to go against what the market's telling you. You got to be right and go against what the market's telling you, right? And if you're waiting for everybody to tell you, oh, it's a great thing to do, and the market's telling you it's a great thing to do, then it's too late. Then it's already priced in. So these bear markets where you've got conviction, this is where you buy Luna at 0.0000001 cent, and you make crazy returns on a technical, or you buy Pirate Chain or Monero at really low prices, and then you wait for everybody else to catch up to you. It's about being early. It's about being right and being early, and you have to have a stomach for it, because you've got to be willing to go against the market. One of the great things about markets, as opposed to say gambling. So like some people say, oh, well, investing in crypto or investing in anything is just gambling. Well, not here's why it's not. Okay, if you walk into a casino and you go to the blackjack table with the craps, let's say the craps table, the odds, right? The odds are 49% in your favor and 51% in favor of the house, right? And maybe you'll get lucky and you have a big roll, and you've got the mojo, and you walk away up. That's great. In markets, the odds are in your own mind. All you see is a price, and you could say, what, your price is wrong. Your price in terms of where it's going is wrong. So in my mind, even though the price is actually quite low in Pirate Chain right now, the odds of doing well on it are enormously beneficial relative to to getting hurt on it. Certainly in a longer time horizon, you kind of make your own odds. You're looking at the market and going, all right, well, what odds do you make? What do you think it's worth? And that's why I think it's a better opportunity in the market, because you're not just taking the odds given to you. You're actually dictating what you think it should be, and you're voting with your dollars when you invest. And I think that's what pays off over time.
So I'm going to ask you kind of a philosophical question here. Let's say Monero does go up to, let's say, $1 million of Monero, and Pirate Chain goes up to $500,000, hypothetically, in the future. I think the question people are going to ask is, where do I put my money? Because in a sense, there's not a better place really to store your money than a privacy coin. Do you understand what I'm saying in regards to the utility that it offers?
Absolutely. I mean, look, ultimately, the prospect of privacy coins as money, the brass ring that we're playing for is to basically do what Bitcoin was supposed to do, right? And do it and be that ultimate sort of global world money that we can use. Now, look, I actually think that there's a place for Bitcoin regardless. And I love Bitcoin. I think it's terrific. I think we need it still at this point. And I think that there's a place for public, mandatorily public transactions, right? Maybe it's having, hey, I'd be very happy for, if the Treasury and the government wanted to do all their funding in Bitcoin where everyone could see it, I'd be very happy with that. They probably wouldn't like that. They don't want people seeing, they don't want the citizens seeing what their money is being used on. But I think that's a reasonable use case for it. But in terms of the people who want privacy and should have privacy as a right, Monero, Pirate Chain, these are things that there is no other really. This is the way to do it. This is actually everything that Satoshi wanted. He didn't know how to do it at the time, as we've talked about and written about. He even went on record basically saying that he wished he could do this and that, which is exactly what Monero did later on. He just didn't know how to technically build it into the protocol. But we've got that now. So yeah, and this is why I think that even our bull estimates that we've written about, because I think we've only said Pirate going up to $100, and Monero going up to $5,000. Like those could be wildly conservative. If what happens, as we think ultimately will happen, is that people will really begin to be getting this in mass, and then create some momentum and create some critical mass, we could see a world where they're the massive leaders, and they should be in the top 10, if not fighting with Bitcoin for the number one spot.
You've been very critical of Ethereum over the years throughout your writings. How do you see Dero, Dero, coming in and maybe taking the place of Ethereum?
I think that I continue to be really critical of Ethereum, and in fact, I'm probably gonna be expressing a bit more detail on that in the near future. Something I'm working on in a bit more detail. I think that as a smart contract network, Dero is to some extent still vulnerable to some of the criticisms that I have of Ethereum, but it's got two big things going for it. The first one is that it's got a long ways to go. So, when something is worth, 300 million, it's a lot easier to think it's fairly valued or undervalued than when it's worth 300 billion, right? So it ultimately comes down to value as well. And there's an old saying, there's no such thing as a bad asset, just bad prices, right? It's nothing wrong with the asset, just if you pay $100 for it versus if you pay $1 for it, that's the part that matters. And I think Dero, because it's still so small in terms of value appreciation, even taking into account some of the fundamental knocks that I have on the economics of smart contract platforms, it's still got a massive way to go. So I think that's a huge one. But the second one I think is even more important, which is why I'm so constructive on it. We're talking about privacy for financial transactions. And I think that particularly think about DeFi, right? DeFi has been the killer app for Ethereum. It has been, and you could argue that in more recent days it's been NFTs to some extent. I think that DeFi is still going to be the leader, or has been the leader in terms of certainly putting it on the map and blowing it up from a very small, relatively small project, something worth hundreds of billions of dollars. In Monero and Pirate Chain, there's an argument to be made that when people say, "Oh, it's private," "Oh, is that for illegal transactions? Is that for buying drugs? I don't know if I want to be associated with that." We think that's wrong. We think that's the wrong way to approach it, but that is how some people view it, at least initially when they see it. When it comes to financial transactions, though, of saying, "All right, I want to stake, I want to do lending, I want to earn yield," do you really want your financial transactions, not just using money on a day-to-day basis, but actually your full strategy? Do you really want to broadcast that to the world? Financial privacy is, I think, something that everyone can understand very easily, saying, if I'm doing all these transactions, I don't really like the idea of publishing it. If the IRS changes the tax code and decides they want to look back at the records and penalize people for things, and I'm not saying that they're going to do this, certainly don't have a crystal ball, and you could argue that it wouldn't happen, but the fact of the matter is that you can always go back on Ethereum, you can always go back on Bitcoin and any other public chain forever and see everything that people did, and there's no ability to ever turn that off, right? So what you did 3 years ago on Ethereum, it's still there. If someone is critical of you and saying, we don't think you should have done that. Now, whether they can go back and punish you for something in the past is a different question, but it's a realistic prospect that they can certainly try. And I think that the notion then of being able to do all these transactions in a way where it's your business and no one else's, and that you're in control of that, and you as a responsible entity, look, it's on you to pay your taxes and to report everything appropriately, but in terms of publishing it so that the world can see it and can use that data against you and mine it and harvest that data to build your profile, right? And never mind doing even more nefarious things against you. I think that's something that will be very easy for people to appreciate. I mean, I honestly can't think of a single reason why, if I said to you as a DeFi investor, "Hey, here are these two systems. You can do everything you want on this one over here, or you can do everything that you want on this one over there. And the only difference is one of them is broadcast to the world and the other one is private and only you can see it." Who on earth would pick the first one? I can't think of it. I can't even imagine why anybody would. And I think understanding that is a lot easier than dealing with some of the negative stigma that's still associated with Monero or Pirate Chain, in that sort of being used for dark web transactions.
Yeah, it's just wild how this is still relatively unknown, and that the vast majority of people still think that Ethereum and Bitcoin offer the privacy that Dero and Monero offer. So yeah, we are definitely in the early days, guys, which is something to be happy about. Any last words of advice for anyone watching this? Because everything you just said kind of, probably blew people out of the water here. I mean, a lot of people probably did not even know that Bitcoin was as transparent as you described it.
Yeah, like to the extent that that's new to you, I would absolutely invite you to dig into that, right? Because this is, it may be a bit startling and maybe a bit unsettling to go, oh, I've just bought all this Bitcoin and now I found that there's an issue with it. Don't worry about it. We're early days, right? But get smart on it now. Get ahead of it now. Do your research. Understand what's going to happen, because we are still early. If you're hearing this now, you are in the very early class, and there's still a huge opportunity to get ahead of this wave when it comes. So I think, bear markets are no fun, but bull markets are made a lot more fun when you've positioned yourself for their inevitable return in a bear market. And that's what you got to be thinking about now. Don't think about one week or 1 month from now. Think about several months out in the future, and that, Bitcoin's going to go back up again. The market's going to go back up again. And these types of projects that have fundamental merit, that have, that are already showing resilience in this downturn, right? Just everything I was talking about, that Monero is kind of holding its ground or improving its ground with, a support base that has conviction. I think they're going to do extremely well, and the next bull market's going to be that much more fun for you and that much more profitable for you. So keep the faith, keep learning, and keep questioning. Question everything. If you don't understand something, ask. So
I was going to
keep trying, because
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. No, I have a question that I want to ask you away from the cameras, but I kind of feel like asking you right now here, because this is probably how important, it's very pertinent to all this. I've thought about this quite a bit, and I've always asked myself whether there is some factor out there regarding the fundamental constitutive makeup of cryptocurrency in general that is as important as privacy, as fungibility, that we may be overlooking. Can you think of anything that
question.
We could possibly be overlooking? Because I think that every other factor that would constitute as a prerequisite for sound money, divisibility, transportability, they're all there already in crypto. The big one is fungibility, and that's what privacy offers.
Agreed.
So could there possibly be something else that we're overlooking?
I'm not a fan of the guy. I think it was Donald Rumsfeld, and not a personal fan of the individual, but I give credit where it's due. I think in one of the Iraq invasions, he talked about the risks, and he talked about there's known knowns and there's known unknowns, and then there's unknown unknowns. And the unknown unknowns are you don't even know what you don't know. And I think that you have to be humble, and you've got to always acknowledge the fact that there may be something out there. There are things out there that we just have no clue about, and that we haven't seen yet. So to answer your question, is there something else right now that I think is as important? In my mind, the answer is no. But there's an asterisk next to that. And that asterisk is that could change. And that's why we have to always challenge ourselves. And that's why you've got to always ask questions, not just of others, but most importantly of yourself, and say, all right, what could go wrong? What am I missing? What could there be something else that changes things? And just have faith that if you keep doing the work, and that you do come across something like this, that there will be an opportunity for you to actually shift course, adjust course, and get on the right train, whatever that train may be. I think this is the right train right now. But look, that's part of what we do at TCV is continually question each other, and keep trying and try and find out, is there something that we're missing? I think one of the great things about Monero is that they regularly convene, developers and participants regularly convene in meetings they call Breaking Monero, where people actually actively try to figure out things that are wrong, that they're missing. But at I think the ability to challenge each other in that way is on a regular basis, I think is incredible. And I think that's what we do at TCV, and I think we'll keep doing that. And I'm going to have to jump on that, Rafael. But
awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Z. I really appreciate it. And until next time, everyone, peace, love, and anarchy. Take care.
A recent bloodbath has shaken the cryptocurrency market to its core. When the stablecoin Luna collapsed, the entire industry felt the ripples. And longtime and new investors alike started hammering down on the panic button. But not clients of the Crypto Vigilante. 2 months before the apocalyptic event, famed crypto asset analyst Mr. Z predicted this exact scenario and told their vigilantes exactly what to do about it. Mr. Z explained that if confidence in the asset was ever tested, it would trigger a death spiral loop that would cause Luna to implode. He also warned their vigilante readers not to use UST as a reliable store of value and what to do instead. Discover their predictions and how the Crypto Vigilante keeps their readers safe while making them wealthier every step of the way. Because these shockwaves haven't finished yet, but the real cryptocurrency bull market is right around the corner, and you want to be ready. Read more at cryptovigilante.io.